I'm very happy to see you all here. So really warmly welcome to the Finnish Institute. This evening is a bit of a special evening. What we're going to do, I'm going to talk a little bit on ancient Greek tanning. First, I'm going to introduce you our guests. We have two master tanners, Hanna Nore.
Hello everybody.
And Wirkkala.
Alright.
So I start first with Hanna. She's a Finnish tanning master who started her journey into tanning over 20 years ago. She's the author of an all-encompassing book on traditional tanning methods, which was very recently published. So Hanna turned actually from a tanning master to a master tanner, who is also teaching the skills herself now for quite a few years already.
Yeah, 12 actually.
And then Wirkkala, she was the first tanner I ever talked to. Anne has learned the craft of tanning over many years as well. Anne has taught especially fish skin tanning over the last 5 years or so. She mentioned to me at our first meeting in Fiskars that for her, tanning is an occupation closest to life. She explained that you can see the whole lifespan, scars and growings of an animal whose skin you work with such close contact. We all know that we use leather products, all of us, daily. They are in our lives, but often we do not know what actually happens when skin is turned into leather. Sometimes we even do not want to know, because the associations of tanning usually bring ideas about something being gruesome, something being disgusting, and so on. Leather has also been called antiquities plastic, and for reason. Hardly any individual could avoid encountering leather in his or her daily life in ancient times. Not only for footwear, which is the most obvious one, or liquid containers and garments, leather was the material also for more unobvious items such as curtains, bed covers, toys. It was of course used in military, agriculture and seafaring, where leather was in many ways irreplaceable. Now, leather products particularly have received recently quite a bit of attention in the ancient scholarship. And we know that in the Roman scholarship, even leather production, tanning and tanneries have recently become increasingly documented area of research. But for some reason, this is not the case in Greek ancient studies. And things are, though, changing here as well. But it's worthwhile asking why. Tanning, as I said, usually is associated or imagined as a smelly and foul activity, and thus I think it in one way falls outside those traditional domains of ancient production patterns. We know a whole lot about ceramics, of course, metals, fabrics, daily consumables, and so on. Tanning as a trade was for a long time despised, almost religiously. In ancient Greece as well, there are some texts that say that tanners has to be sent outside of the borders. But as a profession, it was lowly regarded. But also, tanning has been controversially valued as a necessary trade. So perhaps there is also some kind of an underlying uneasiness towards tanning. We think that originally animate part of a living being, its skin from a dead carcass, when it is to be processed into an inanimate substance and commodity of leather, so we feel uneasy about the first stage. So it is possible that tanning has not simply been sitting very well into the traditional image of the ancient Greece. The one type of a very typical quote is the following. Until the end of the 19th century, there was little, if any, change in the methods of tanning from ancient times. This is a very usual type of opening in the most of the studies of tanning methods, presenting an historical overview. Tanning has been an essential and the necessary part of production processing. It has been regarded as a survival method almost in any traditional culture, particularly in the northern hemisphere. Leather making has thus been described as man's first manufacturing process. But in the study of ancient Greek tanning, we have nevertheless to be careful and when we try to figure out what actually was done in skin treatment processes, since later, even Roman, medieval, or subsequent tanning practices cannot, of course, be taken as a direct model to be implanted into the ancient Greek situation. But of course, they may us provide clues, and just for the reason because there was very little change in tanning until the chrome tanning was invented in the end of the 19th century, and became common in 1850s. And of course, then the methods changed from natural methods, vegetable tanning, into chemical use of chemicals. That has then resulted into tanning these days, in our days, globally being a very toxic industry. It has the recent statistics say that it is the fourth toxic industry globally at the moment. Just a handful of things to remember when we hear about tanning methods, and they're very simple ones. Skin is not leather. Even the processes, traders, workmen, their social status and perception was divided between these. Those people, for instance, who worked in ancient Greece with skins, tanners, that is, bursotepsai, they worked with skins, and those who worked with treated leather, skytotomoi, skyteinen, and those who cut ready-made leather, these groups were perceived very differently. The skin workers, they were regarded as rough and raw, whereas those who work with leather, much cleaner and more sophisticated. We have Plato who loved cobblers. He has a lot of shoemakers in his texts as a kind of ideal handicraft skill. In Greek antiquity, difference between skins and hides and their treatment on one hand and the leather on the other was also indicated in various ways, which can be read even in skin and leather terminology, and this is quite interesting. Skins and hides are the raw material, while leather is processed or tanned animal commodity. Of course, our Greek word derma is a generic term which covers both skins and leathers, but the distinction between unprocessed, not tanned, that is, skins, and processed, tanned leather is reflected in the very surprisingly rich terminology when hides, skins, and leathers are described in ancient text and epigraphical material. It is essential to make also a distinction between rawhides, leathers, furs, and pelts. Rawhides are termed, for example, dora, rhinos, or bursa, which is actually the last one is for oxhide. Whereas then processed leather usually takes a prefix derived from skytos, or is described as skytinos. And then there we have, for example, certain terms which refer to made or tanned leather, like diphthera, which means tanned leather from which leather products are made. Then, of course, pelts and fleeces and furs are coined with their own specific terms, like accordion, nakee, nakos, koas, or sisura, which is maybe the most usual one of them, which variously refer to different types of hairy hides. Another important distinction is between so-called true tanning and which is vegetable tanning, where vegetables with tannins is used, and something which is regarded pseudo tanning. These terms are not very good, of course, because pseudo tanning produces not the pseudo leather; it's also leather, but the distinction also archaeologically is quite significant. Vegetable tanning is a more complex process in which tannins, vegetable extracts, replace the animal protein in the skin to make it flexible, durable, strong, and so on. So this means also that chemically, simply, skin is not the same thing as leather. When then tannins extracted from plants, which of them are not used to replace the animal protein in the skins, we talk usually about curing, which employs relatively simple methods of delaying the onset of the decay of the skins. There are various ways to do it, with fats, with smoke, and so on. Of course, in ancient Greece, curing leather could have been carried out in nondescript or even movable temporary structures, whereas tanning, so true tanning with vegetables requires distinctive structures and features. It is of course logical to think that when there was a need to treat skins fast, or if there was no established tanning facility in the vicinity, simpler and faster methods were employed to treat the skins. And in the recent Roman archaeology, there is archaeology which have discovered recently quite big tanneries. In Greece, there is just simply not a tradition of paying attention to tanneries. There's been the lack of criteria to identify them, but there certainly were also tanning, which was done in the certain types of pits, which usually were arranged so that the kind of a rotation could have taken place when the tanning was practiced, because that is a long time-consuming process. So we know that that in ancient Greece there is the best, maybe the very representative description of a curing comes from Homer. It's a description of a fat curing of an ox hide, thereby providing a rather good example. And as a man gives to his people the hide of a great bull for stretching, all drenched in fat, and when they have taken it, they stand in a circle and stretch it. And immediately its moisture goes out and the fat enters in at the tugging of many hands, and then hide is stretched to be utmost. But of course the bull hide is huge, so in the Homer there's many men in the circle doing this. In modern terminology, this oil or fat tanning is called chamoising. Another good example where this distinction between cured and vegetable tanned leather was drawn in textual sources, we have many of them, but I just give you two, is Xenophon's description in Anabasis, when he describes how soldiers, when they were sleeping in the cold with their shoes on, they were really in somewhere where there was snow and it was so cold. They got straps sinking into their flesh and the shoes freezing on their feet because of the shoes of men had given out and they had to turn to wearing garbatinai type of brogues made of hides softened from freshly flied ox hide. I think it's not unrealistic to think that the hides here were somehow quickly cured, and then that's why they were not durable, because cured leather is not so durable and it doesn't stay good in the moist conditions. Then a couple of words about archaeology. It was, many of you certainly know, that it was long believed that only fully tanned leather material can survive for long periods of time in condition that keeps it archaeologically recognizable. And that is why it was assumed that the vegetable tanning was practiced since age old, since Neolithic even. But this theory has been questioned for reason, and it is now regarded that that surviving prehistoric leather material is a result of exceptional, quite rare and usually anaerobic conditions. And that leather that survives from those times is not necessarily vegetable tanned, but rather cured. Now, due to preservation issues, archaeological leather from Greece is indeed quite rare, but it is not totally non-existent. But anyway, because of this reason, there was the question of the introduction of vegetable tanning into Mediterranean has been raised. It is quite safe to say that vegetable tanning was very well known in classical Greece. Theophrastus, whose texts describe even in detail what kind of tannins were the tanners used, so it's very detailed knowledge that we have about this. It's safe to say that those methods were developed by the 2nd century BC. But in Greece, it wasn't so centralized industry as it was in Greece. Now, usually when we think of tanning, when we read about it, it depends on how to divide the process. Usually we have this tripartite structure. The first one, which is fleshing and cleaning the hide to be ready for the process. Then second one is the dehairing, when the hair is extracted from the hide. And then the last one, which is a very long, time-consuming, process is the tanning itself when the vegetables are used to replace the protein of the skin and to alter its structure permanently. We know a lot about the transportation of hides, storing them in ancient Greece, how the other ships were loaded with hides, apparently to be tanned somewhere else where they originated. How they were stored, we know that the salt was used in ancient Greece. If you salt the hide, it weighs up to almost half the way of the freshly flied hide. So of course that facilitates the transport of the hides. So in the cleaning, any loose pieces of membranes, fat or meat still attached to the underside of the skin is of course removed. This perhaps is somehow the iconic phase of tanning. Because it's done on the bench or thranos, as it is in ancient Greek, exactly in the same way as it's often depicted in medieval or more recent pictures of tanners. This is actually a very kind of a masculine image of tanning. You need the muscles, that's associations of it with the smell, physical work, dead carcasses. Aristophanes has loads of references to tanning. In one of his pieces, he's saying, your skin will be stretched on the bench. And he uses this thranos. So this is an example where the information on tanning in ancient texts is quite often also pretty much hidden. Then we go to dehairing. This is maybe the stage that interests people usually most because it is associated with the smell. Dehairing, the most straightforward method, of course, is to simply fold and pile the hides after they had been flied tight and let incipient putrefaction set in until the hair roots loosen. But this process was in antiquity as well speeded up and effectuated by sprinkling the hair with urine or liquid with animal dung. Pigeon dungs were by the way, collected in ancient Greece. We know that, for instance, the keepers of the temple of Apollon and Delos made income by selling the dung of the birds in their dovecots. Pigeon dung actually is particularly rich in nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium, and such it makes a good fertilizer, but it's much better as a tanning because there is so much of ammonia that it can be too acidy as fertilizer. So it's possible that it was collected for tanning purposes. I'm quite convinced about that. There are other substances that were used in this phase in tanning in ancient Greece. Theophrastus mentions something which he calls oion den pyrsotepsiken, tanner's manure, which could have been a extract from tanning, the excesses from tanning, then used as fertilizer as well. In Athens, we know that there were the officials called koprologoi who collected human sewage and waste from the streets. And of course, we know that urine was known to have been used in Rome, but it seems that it was also so in ancient Greece, although this has been deduced from a slightly later sources than classical or Hellenistic, Pliny for instance. There were other substances as well, like mulberry leaves and the fruit of bryony. Again, Theophrastus in his Plants tells these things in detail. And then the last thing, the tanning itself. This was, as I said, it took a longer time, from 3 months. Sometimes it has been said that from even up to the year. In principle, the hides were set horizontally on top of one another in layers in pits and vats, and coarsely crushed or grinded vegetable material was stewed in layers between the hides on the bottom and then between each hide, and then water to immerse the skins. In larger operations, vats and pits were really worked in series, and these tannins then they were occasionally stirred, but this was quite stable stage of tanning itself. Now, the tannins are called in Greek. They are pharmaka. An interesting term in many ways, of course, but one of the meanings of the pharmaka word is tannins. We know I have collected the list of which plants the Greeks used. In the tanning operations, we have certain writers who are very informative about this, like sumac. We have examples of that there, or and some other like oak bark and also oak galls. They're very rich in tannins, up to 60% in them. They have been collected, and Theophrastus again tells us that they were the best tannin plants used by Pyrsotepsae. So this just an introduction to ancient Greek tanning practices, and now I think it really is informative for us to hear what happens in tanning, which is not done now in the traditional methods, because as I mentioned, similar methods were really used since very, very old, and now it's becoming back again.
Thank you, Petra.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. It was really, really good introduction, and it actually tells everything what we do, because we use those methods, and it doesn't sound to my ear that it's the ancient Greek methods, because it's something what we do. But we will start with the tools a little bit, because we will start with the dirty side. We will start with scraping the meat side to take all the tissues away, membraning. So we have different kind of tools in Scandinavia, and actually these are really, really old models, because you can see this in the museums too. So we have a little bit different kind of models. Depends how big you are. This is my favorite one, and I'm working down when I'm taking the meat off. There is in USA, there is a way to work up, but we in Scandinavia, we work down and use the whole body to scrape the bigger hides. I like to work with the moose hides and ox hides. So they are quite big, and I'm quite little. So it's good to use your whole body weight to make it thinner and take the meat away. And also all the membrane, because that is the important things in tanning, that you take the membrane away. And if we take a look at different animals, so the sheep skins are really easy to make because they have a loose membrane, but the goat, it's jumping a lot more, so it's like really thicker. And also cows, ox, they are thicker, so it's difficult, more work to take it off. And that is the tricky part of the tanning, that you take the whole membrane away, because if you leave some bits, tanning acids are not allowed to go inside, and then it's going to be like this kind of, because these are not tanned at all. So this is like drum hides, raw hides, and in Greek it's...
Yes, if you do not do anything for them, they go like that pretty quickly. So something has to be done, and certainly was, because the skin at the same time was one of the most valuable parts of an animal. So that's why it is very logical that tanning operations took place maybe in the vicinity of those locations where skins came out of the animals. And I have looked myself into connection of tanneries and sanctuaries, because of the sacrificial animals, and that has opened quite interesting perspectives into the functions of the sanctuaries as well, because we know that loads and big animals were sacrificed and slaughtered in the sanctuaries. There is also a connection between being leather, which came from sacrificed animals or sacrificial animals. It was called hierotuta, so it was the better quality, because of course sacrificial animals had to be perfect without blemish. They also then produced a much better leather. In Andanian inscription, it says that women were not allowed to enter the sanctuary if they were not wearing sandals made out of the hides, the leather of the sacrificial animal.
Thank you, Petra. Yeah, we take more scraping tools now. So here was the fleshing knife, or what was it in Greek?
Yeah,
Arbelos. And here is the something what we call ulu, because the Inuit ladies are using these for seal skins. If you are working with the smaller animals, so we have this kind of hand scrapers, and this name is quite nice. I like it. It's from the Sami area. It's called Naskain, and it's for the membraning. And you will work it like you have this kind of rack, yeah, and you will use quite a lot of power to work with the meat side to get it really nice, clean. We have still one. This is also from the Sami people. This is called yekiö. This is for scraping hides which are dried, so they are not in the salt. They are dried, and they are also put in the frame, so they will hold, and you will scrape it meat side and make it also thinner.
The quick note on this, that the tools, they really are the same throughout the Middle Ages, and as you say, also in different hemispheres, because the skin is so basic thing, and it's always the same. So it's a simple tools that still work. But it's if you start looking at for instance, the visual material that we have from the Greeks with the kind of a leather eyes, you start seeing this. They are the cobbler's tools that we see in some of the vase paintings. There's a row of the tools, but it really remind those if someone wants to see examples.
Then we could take a look a little bit to the rawhides and drums make from the rawhide skin, because that is what we quite often use. It's really nice sound, and it's because because here is a little bit moisture, so it's not the best sound right now. It continues the living process when it's rawhide, and you can also make the different kind of shapes. But of course, there is the little bit problems with the moisture again, because these are not waterproof, because these are rawhide. They are living organism. And when you are tanning it, we have different kind of tanning acids, what we use as traditional tanners. So we can start with the fats. So this is fat tanned, and of course, it's dehaired first, but we couldn't do the dehairing here because, it is the smelly part of the tanning maybe, but it depends what you use for dehairing. We have different kind of techniques what we can use. We can use the bacteria from the hide. Rotting process, but something what we control. That is what Sami people use quite often in the north, and it's something what I do also in the winter time. I leave the hides under the snow to they can rotten there at the winter, and when the spring comes, they are dehaired, and it's wonderful. I like the method. It's not smells at all. Something what the tanners love to do to have a control, so you can use the lime. But there is that the pH, it's going to change. So there is a lot of the steps what you need to do. But when we have doing the dehairing, so then we can start the tanning, and maybe we can start with the fat and oil tanning. We have different kind of fats. I like to use brain, because it really soft, and it's really easy to get. And I like the idea that you can get the tanning acids from the animal. And it's actually quite nice thing to say that the animal own brains, it's enough to the whole hide. And that's true. I have tanned fish skins with the fish brain. I have tanned foxes with the fox brain. I have tanned deers with the deer brain. So here is some sheep tanned with the sheep's own brains, of course. So you can take a look, smell it if you want. Quite nice. And here is some sheep again, which is not ready yet. We are just stretching it because we need to oxidize the fat so it can take
in the
into the fibers.
yes.
This is basically what is done is what the Homer describes. And he talks about fats. The fat may have come for pigs, but in this case, it's the brain is so fatty, isn't that? That is the reason why. Yeah, it is quite universally used in this traditional kind of way of tanning. I haven't found any references for particularly brain tanning in the Greek world, but the brains, of course, they were used for many purposes.
Yeah, we can show you now some vegetable tanned, because that is maybe most of the interesting part of the tanning, because you can get tannins from the different kind of trees. I would so like to take a part of these trees and boiled a little bit and take a because I'm quite used to notice if there is tannin or not. If you have tried red wine with a lot of tannins, so you know how does it taste, because it's going like up. So we will put around a little bit. This is deer.
Yeah.
Quite thicker deer, and this was tanned with spruce. Yes.
About those tannins, Theophrastus says that the tanners, they can be divided in different groups. The barks, 3 barks, usually different oaks. He specifies even which are the best oaks for this. And then fruits and leaves. And that hrus, which is sumac, he describes that was also used as a colorant, which is still the case. And it seems that really the same ones are still, the oak is one of the best, and because oak is so well spread. But even the acorns of oaks were 1920s collected in Greece to be used in tanneries.
Here's alder.
Yeah, we could
bark.
put it that.
Yeah, this is
also,
sheep.
because that the sheep skin, it's thinner than the deer, and when it's tanned with the alder, it has a different kind of color. And when we are tanning at home, the process is really long to us, because it's an animal, and it's still like an animal when you are tanning it, because it wants to have something to eat, and it's eating the tannins. So I'm cooking the tannin liquids from this alder, and with the alder it's quite weak tannins, so it will take to tan this kind of sheep, so it will take 3 months.
How long would you spend with the big ox hide?
I have done the ox hides, and I have tanned it with the oak and spruce, so it was like 15 months. And then another one was 9 months. And of course, when it's tanned, so the next step is to make it soft and flexible, because when it's swimming in the tanning acid, so it's getting really, really dry. So we need a little bit add some moisture, greasing. So we like to use just oil, local oils from Finland. We don't have olives in Finland, so we don't use olive oils, but we use rapeseed oils. And also we can use the egg yolks, because there is really good oils and fats in the egg yolks. So you can make a mixture and just leave it there some minutes or overnight. And after that, you will soften it. Anne has here these fish leathers. Pike, tanned with willow.
This was willow, yes.
Yeah, so
yes.
We can put it's really, I know that this is good tanned, because I can touch it and I feel it that this is really good tan, but this is really, really dry. So now we need to moisture it and soften it.
Yeah.
So here is some what is moisture inside and almost softened. So now you can get some.
Yeah, and this one you can little bit help me to
Help and
crush
to crush the fibers, because the last step is to crush the fibers to get it soft and also stretch out the fibers. This is my favorite tool to softening. It's called räkkirauta. It's a really nice word in Finland. Stretching iron. But you will also use whole body to you take it from the leather and then just so you do like this. And I need to show you my newest räkkirauta, which I get from my friend last year. And there is how old this is, because it has been from two tanners, 7088 and 702020. And there is one tanner's mark and there is another mark. And I'm quite sure, because this is so little one, so I'm quite sure that it's the woman's stretching tool. So I'm really, really glad that I get this.
This is actually wonderful, because I talked about the masculine image of tanning. So the tanners that I know are all women, and just a little footnote from Athens, we know by name, as I've now collected 6 or 7 tanners by name. The one of them comes from Curse Tablets, and she is a woman.
Then here is some softening tools also. This is from the museum from Finland. So this is from the island where I live. We had 8 tanneries at the 17th century, but not anymore. So this is something what you take moisture and water off from the bigger hide. This is for ox hide. So you use both hands. It's from. This is smaller. This I used a lot for stretching out and make it soft and pulling out the water and moisture. These are not sharp at all. This is also for stretching the edges quite often to get it nice. This is a miniature for the bigger ones what we have in tanneries, that you can cross the fibers to get it soft and nice. So actually you could put these to the wall and you could throw out the leather and then just cross the leather meat side to get it really nice and soft. We will jump to the fish skins a little bit.
Yeah. So I have local fishers who gladly give me some skins. Usually everybody are happy that somebody wants to use them. Also, when I go to buy a fish from a shop, then I say that turn it off. I can see the leather side, and I take the leather also there. And it's very delicate. You have to, in 1 hour in Finland, you have to put it in the freezer so it don't rot. Okay, now after that I get it and I put it to the salt water little while, and then after I take the flesh side, I clean the flesh side, and normally I use something like this, like kitchen tools, not so sharp, and I just scrape it. Okay, then after I take the suomut.
These ones. One is left.
Scales.
Yes.
Yeah.
And have to be very delicate also, because don't break the skin. I use something like this nail brush, just depending on the fish. Okay, then after I will wash it with the pine soap.
Yeah.
Yes, we have pine soap here in Finland.
You could use olive oil soap.
Yeah.
Because that is the important part of the fish skin tanning, that you wash the fish smell away, because if you are tanning it and it's smelling fish, so the leather shoes what you are going to make it, so it's going to smell, and maybe the neighbor or your friends don't like the smelling shoes. So it's really important to get those smells and bacterials and different kind of fats from the skin away before you are starting the tanning.
Yes.
We know from Greece, from the Hellenistic times, that the fish was boiled for glue. In the Black Sea area, where there was, of course, this famous glue, which was the best, and even Aristotle mentions the glue which comes from taurokolla, and then is ichthyokolla.
Yeah. In the old times, they have walked with the fish skins. They just get it from the fish and put it on the food and walk maybe 5-10 kilometers.
So like one pair of shoes for
Yeah.
for just 1 month, because the fish skin structure it's more thicker than mammal structure, so you can get really nice shoes.
There is my experimenting pike shoes. Just the fish that I was just trying.
Yeah, it's just pike.
Yeah, just pike. Yes. After the wash, then I try it to the makkarakuivaksi.
Almost dry.
And then after tan it with oil or the vegetables.
And of course, if you don't tan the fish skin, so here is the experiment, and you can maybe call this like pergament, but not exactly, because if you are doing right kind of pergament, so you need to also scrape the outside of layer to make it more.
Yeah, to make it more porous. There is it's parchment that we're talking about, because parchment is it is not vegetable tanned, as we so it doesn't it's not water resistant. There is one there which I did myself last year. This is a goat, but of course then we all know what was one of the functions of parchment as well for writing.
Yeah, here is salmon with fat tanned, oil tanned, and this was brooch tanned.
The different kind of qualities depends what kind of tanning methods do you use, and of course what are you going to make it, because the vegetable tanned make it always a little bit stretchier, little bit thicker. Some people said that the vegetable tanner it's going to be like harder, but I like that it's like stable, so it will hold the form.
Yeah.
Of course, we could show you some kind of leather what don't have the grain on, because these leathers what you have there now, they have grain on, so the layer from outside is on. But if we are talking about the chamois, that is grain off, and we will take a grain off. There is different kind of techniques to taking grain off, but here is the deer hide grain off, and also brain tanned, so it's like quite stretchy, nice. And you could also smoke this after tanning to make it more water resistant. Yeah, this is only just brain tanned. But I have one what is smoked already. It depends what kind of tree you are using for smoking to get the different kind of colors. So of course, this one is smoked with the birch, so it's light brown. We will jump to the fur side, and if you want to have it with the fur, with the hair on, these are more delicate to the salting process also, because you want it that the hair is going to be stable. So you need to be careful when you take the hide and salt it or dry it or just freeze it. There is 3 different kind of technique when you get the hide, raw hide, that what you are going to do with. We are using quite often salting because we are from Finland and we are from south part of the Finland, so there is quite moisture. So we cannot dry it. They can do the drying in the north, Sami people do a lot of drying and also a lot of freezing because there is colder climate and also colder winters. But I use the salt, and I can have the fox in salt 8 to 10 months if I want. But that is something what I usually don't want, because if I had it in salt so long, so it came really hard, like cop, cop, cop. So I usually put these little guys to the freezer, and then I will salt it like 1 week before I start the tanning, because the salt is taking off the muscle liquid. So I want it that off because I want to put the tanning acids in. And then I will scrape the meat side and of course membraning it really, really nicely to get the clean meat side. And then I will wash it. I will add some shampoo, and then I will start the tanning. We have same kind of techniques to the furs and pelts that we use to the leathers. So this fox has been swimming in the same kind of liquid as these guys, as these leathers. But these are swimming only 3 days. And I will add really, really fast, stronger and stronger tannins. Now I cannot be like lazy to make these. I need to be like really, really active. The fox will tell you when it's ready because it's not eating anymore. I can see it from the liquid color. It doesn't change, and also it doesn't take tannins. I can take a taste and there is still tannins. So then I know the fox is ready, because when it's not ready, so the liquid will be just like water. All the color will go away and all the tannins will swim inside the fibers. So if I take a taste, it's like water. So I will follow with the fox how it goes, and these guys comes with the 3 days. And I quite often I put it like stronger and stronger liquid every hour. So this is like bark tannit, vegetable tannit, in like swimming in the liquid. And here is this rabbit is also vegetable tannit, but this has not been swimming in the liquid. This has been frost to the liquid. Many, many layers, 10 to 12 layers that it's inside the fibers. This is not so delicate technique because it can be tried after 2 layers. You can try it and you can continue after 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years. It's a little bit different kind of qualities. It's a little bit thicker. It's not so stretchy than the fox will be, and also rabbits if they are swimming in the tannin liquid. So here.
And just a kind of a little going back in time, you may remember Dialectian's maximum price list. It's from the 4th century. It's later, but there's a section dermata. There's furs as well as very specifically said which skins are ergasomena and which are not. So tanned or untanned, and then some of them are colored as well. The most expensive hide item is surprisingly, it is the seal skin. And then the second most expensive is lion. And then it goes down, of course. Then comes the big ox animals and so on and so forth, depending on how they are tanned.
Yes, seals are wonderful. Then, of course, we can use the fat tanning, brain or egg yolks to this kind of furs also. There is a baby beaver tanned with the egg yolks. And here is the raccoon dog tanned with the deer brain. So you get a different kind of quality. Hey, there is my son. Ja, skulle du vilja ge den runt? So there is the raccoon dog. And also here is the rabbit that is brain tanned. There is leg skin to reindeer. That is also fat tanned,
yes.
fat tanned with the egg yolks. Yeah.
Shall we give you an opportunity as well to ask questions if you have any? Use an opportunity now.
Thank you. I have a few questions. So the first of all is how fast you have to be with the skins until you get them, because when you hunt them, how fast they must be to your place to tan them?
The hunters will salt it because they will take a skin off at the same night when they have hunt. So they will salt it. It can take 2 weeks or 3 weeks before I can go and taking care of and put more salt if I cannot start the tanning directly.
Then I have a question. How big has to be your workshop when we are talking about archaeological evidences for tannery? How I must imagine if I have a process with different pots, or you know what I mean, how many installations I need for a workshop.
It depends what kind of animal you tan. Because if you are working with the fish, so you can do it in the kitchen. But if you are working with ox hide or moose hide, so of course you need so much space that you can put it under the liquid, you can put it under the water when you wash it, so you need the space.
Okay, so maybe pottery isn't a good container for doing this.
Yes, it is.
It
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, it is.
So it doesn't have to be like big basins, something.
It also depends how much you will tan. If it's like 3 ox hides per year, or is it like 15?
I think that the bigger animals really in the ancient context, they started needing these establishments, these which are usually dug on the ground, because then you can stir them much and then much more efficiently when you do it from up. At the same time, the ceramic containers and pots would be too heavy for big skins to be tanned. So exactly as you say, small animals could be done in the portable, transferable containers. Why not the pottery as well? And of course, the agriculture and the war were very strong. Leathers were needed. That means ox hides. So then you need something at the stable as well. So it means that the tanneries had to be established somewhere. And this is another discussion where to look for them, where they might have been, where the water is one, the floating water is another question, and so on and so forth.
And if we take a look at the ancient tanneries, so quite often you have these potteries under the ground. So you have it like one for dehairing, only for dehairing, and one for tanning. There is maybe sumac leaves, and then you have one for washing, and maybe one for greasing. So there is all the time the dehairing liquid. It smells really badly because they don't change it. They just add it more poo and urine. So quite often you need to have 3 to 5 potters if you are tanning ox hides.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Can I ask something? If I understood correct, you said that you smoke the skin to make it more waterproof, right?
Yes.
How you smoking? Same as when you're smoking meat?
Almost. Yeah, it's like cold smoke. It's not warm smoke. I will smoke it. I will sew like big bag of those skins, and then I will smoke it that I can see the color changing and the smoke going inside and coming also outside from the fibers. And I can see the color is changing already to the meat side. So then I will turn the bag upside down and smoke the other side, so I can see the color changing also there. And then it makes the fibers going quite far away from other. So if it's getting wet, so it cannot shrink. Yeah.
Shrinking.
Yeah, it kind of shrink. They, in the Greeks, they had these kind of establishments which were used for ginging pigs, and they were called phlogistera. So it's possible that there was, but it's directly. I haven't been able to find anywhere where there's a reference for smoking, using smoke for tanning. Do you have any other questions, or shall we ask our questions then when we have maybe something to eat?
Yeah.
And we can do that. You can of course
you
come and
can
touch everything that
come
is
and
here and put your hands on as
Yes.
it is.
Yes.
Yes,
Welcome.
please.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank